I definitely wouldn't want to be on that bridge in any kind of terrible weather.
No, 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 certainly not. But yeah, just before we progress there, we are live uh, with
Okay.
the White Pill podcast. Thank you guys for joining us. Here with me today, I have Hibakod. Am I? Yeah, because that's a play on like Higapod, or wait, what am I thinking of? It's like a mythological figure that shares the name.
I don't know. Actually, the inspiration for my name uh is from Hungarian. So Hibakod would be like how it's pronounced in Hungarian, and it just means error code. So I was trying to come up with like uh, a username with like a domain uh, that wasn't taken already. So that's what I came up with.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, I just found a wiki entry here. It's for Ichabod, which is the um, it was a priest. So yeah, biblical figure. Um, but in any case, so yeah, since we haven't really interacted much on X besides Wagey Weeb kind of putting your name, throw your name in the hat there. Uh, Tell me about yourself. Besides, from what you told me, you said you moved to Canada recently.
Yeah, so I moved to Canada in the fall of 2019, just before the pandemic struck. And so I was born in the United States. I'm half Hungarian. My mother's from Hungary. I was born in the United States. I grew up in the state of Maine, out in the woods. And yeah, like. Let's see. I'll try to give you like a brief overview, but basically, I grew up out in the woods, kind of in a non-traditional way. Like we didn't have I didn't have electricity for a large portion of my childhood. Like we lived kind of off grid, um, and we made our own power by using a diesel generator, charging up 12-volt batteries, and then we had like a cabin that like the lighting system was a 12 volt system that ran off the batteries, and we had an inverter to run like household appliances when we needed to.
Hmm.
But a large portion of my childhood was spent living off grid, and so that kind of got me interested in electricity and electronics. And so that was my earliest fascination, was just taking electronic things apart and discovering how they work, and learning about circuits. And then I got into radios, uh, and specifically, there was this older guy at church, and he introduced me to ham radios, and then I did a whole bunch of stuff with um, radios, and like built my first FM transmitter. Did all this cool stuff, and so actually, when I went to university in 2016, I actually ended up studying mathematics because the university where I went to didn't have um, like an electrical engineering program. So I studied mathematics. Then out of university, I went to go work in radio communications. I worked as a uh, basically like a radio guy. Like I would install radios in vehicles, like two-way radios. I would hike up mountains to fix repeaters at the top of mountains. Uh, and so I did a lot of stuff with radios, and then I ended up meeting my wife in university at the time, and she's from Canada, um, and so she was studying to be a social worker. So the job prospects in the states weren't that good for her,
Hmm.
and so I ended up following her back to Canada, and we moved here in 2019, and I got a job working um, at a startup, and I worked in electronics manufacturing, making like sensors, pressure sensors for pharmaceutical and beverage industry. And then during the pandemic, I was like, things got kind of difficult with going into the office, and I was like, I want to learn more about software. And so I did some networking, and I got my first job uh, as a web developer, working for like a um, software engineering firm. Basically, it's just a small shop with just a few people, and we worked on a couple government contracts. I did that for about a year and a half, and then I ended up in another startup where we're building software for healthcare. And so now I do that, and we just had our first child about 4 months ago, and yeah, I like it in Canada. I moved from Maine to New Brunswick, so it wasn't a really big switch. Maine and New Brunswick are basically the same place, and it's just an imaginary line that divides the two. So the climate is very similar. Yeah, so you see Presque Isle in the northern part of Maine. That's roughly
Hmm.
where I lived. That's where I went to university, and then um, and then actually, what's funny is my wife, she lived just on the other side of the border, in the Perth
Huh.
Andover area there, and then we moved and we bought a house down around Nakawik, which is about halfway down. Yep.
Wow.
So, uh, yeah. So I really like New Brunswick. It's pretty much the same as Maine, um, like geography wise, climate wise. So it doesn't really feel any different to me, um, other than not having some of the nice things that the United States has. But overall, I'm pretty I'm pretty bullish on Canada, as Cash or Yassine would say. He's also bullish on Canada. I think Canada has a lot of untapped potential, and will do a lot of great things in the next few decades. So I don't mind living here, even though I can't have like my guns and certain things like I did in the States. But I think things will improve.
Okay, quite a story. That is a lot. Well, first of all, welcome to Canada, and congratulations on your kid there. That's a pretty big milestone.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, glad to
Yeah,
have you here.
yeah. I kind of just threw everything out there. So sorry about that.
No. By all means. I mean, the first things first. You lived off grid for the beginning of your childhood. So I mean, in terms of like a living situation, was it just uh like just regular house or like a cabin? I mean, I don't really meet that many people that go about that way of life um every day. So I don't really know like what that even looks like.
Yeah. So we moved to Maine. So my mother, my father, and I, we moved to Maine when I was in the first or second grade. And we moved to northern Maine, north of Presque Isle.
Hmm.
And we when we first moved here, we lived in a trailer, and then my dad uh, ended up purchasing some property, kind of out in the woods. And then basically one day we just kind of left the trailer, and we set up a tent on the property. And then we started living out of the tent. And then my dad bought like a chainsaw and a nail gun, um, and we started building a really rough cut cabin out in the woods, basically. And so we kind of built in and lived in that cabin up until I was like in the eighth grade, um, and and then we also like eventually built like a real house, I guess you could call it, with like a proper foundation
Hmm.
and whatnot. But yeah, the majority of my childhood was spent living off grid out in the woods, which
Wow.
I'm pretty grateful for, actually, because that experience is kind of what uh, kind of developed my interest in electronics and technology, and is what helped me kind of find my way, you know. So
Wow. When you say off grid, you really mean off grid. Like I'm guessing you guys had your own like well for water, or
yeah, like we had a well drilled. You know, we were living off of like uh, water that we would collect from a natural spring nearby for a while,
mm,
but eventually we had a well drilled, and then it was a manual pump at first, and then we eventually got an electric pump put down in there, but you could only run the electric pump when the generator was going.
mm-hmm.
And so we would pump it, so we had like a big storage tank, and like once a week we would turn the generator on and pump water up to the storage tank and then live off of that. So the storage tank was like on the second floor of our cabin, and so basically it would gravity feed
Mm.
like the toilet and the sink and stuff downstairs.
Interesting. Okay, and I'm guessing before setting up plumbing, you guys had to get like an outhouse built as well.
Yeah, yeah, there was like a good year or so of like pooping outside, pooping in a bucket type situation.
Wow, that's funny because my grandma when she was alive, she had this house in Russia, um where yeah, they basically had an outhouse. I don't even think I don't think to this day they even have a toilet. I'm pretty sure it's all just a single outhouse, and I did not enjoy visiting those summers. Or at least, no, I mean I enjoyed the visit. It's just, man, like when you have the comforts of of indoor plumbing, it's very hard to go the other way. I can see the transition the other way, yeah, sure, but oh man, that's really cool, man. So I'm guessing you guys like hunted, had your own garden as well. Like, what did you do for food?
Gardening was big. Yeah, my mom maintained a fairly large garden. Um, but we basically just made trips to Presque Isle like once a month and purchased like groceries and stuff. Couldn't have a lot of meats during the summer, like a lot of fresh meats, because
Mm-hmm.
obviously in those first few years like we didn't have refrigeration. Um, so but obviously during the winter in northern Maine you can just put stuff outside in the snow, so the first few summers were kind of tough because you couldn't really have fresh meat and stuff during the summer. We
Mm-hmm.
didn't really do a lot of hunting, um, per se. Like my dad, he did teach me like how to hunt and stuff, but we didn't really like hunt for food necessarily.
Gotcha. And did you guys do any like kind of canning for the winter, or like preserving? I don't know what the actual name is.
Yeah, yeah, we did quite a bit of that. We ate a lot of canned food for many years. Yeah, and yeah, I mean the whole experience. Like I was always I never wanted to have like kids over from like my friends over from school and stuff because I was always ashamed of like how differently I lived from the other children. Everybody else had running water and electricity, and
Mm-hmm.
but I eventually, I think around like the sixth grade or seventh grade, I had some friends over, and they thought it was cool, and I was just like, yep, this is what we do out here.
Yeah, no, I could totally see that. I mean, if you're going to school with people that like could just whip out a Game Boy or something, and meanwhile, it's like, well, I mean, my backyard got a lot of woods, and sticks and stuff.
Yeah,
We could light shit on fire or something. It's it's I could understand that instinct of being ashamed of that. I get that.
yeah.
Wow.
It's funny that you mentioned the outhouses. I was fairly privileged to be able to go to Hungary several times throughout my childhood, where my
Mm-hmm.
mother is from, and her grandparents were still alive when I was young, and they also had an outhouse. Um and that thing would stink to high hell in the summer. I remember distinctly like the smell of it, like that's just one of those things you can't forget.
Oh yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, here's Hungary. So actually, if you zoom in on Budapest, just north of Budapest, there's a place called Vác. It's kind of at the bend of the river there, VAC.
Oh
Uh,
yeah.
yep, right there. So that's where my grandfather lives. So he's like the last person living. Like all my great grandparents have passed away at this point. They lived to be like in their early 90s, and then my
Oh wow.
grandfather lives here in Vác, and that's where my mother's from too, actually. So, um,
Oh wow.
yeah, I I love Hungary. I love that I'm half Hungarian, and I take a lot of pride in that aspect of my heritage. I think Hungary is a really cool place with a lot of history, and so I always enjoy going to Hungary and enjoying the food and the culture and the history.
Yeah, it's a completely different place. I can't say I've been, but my family, we come from Russia, so some like traditions around like Eastern European stuff. I'm sure that there's some that we share, but even as a kid, like just like you, I was privileged enough to have some family to go back to there, and yeah, like it was like stepping into a different world. Honestly, there's no other way that I could compare it any other way. I mean, for one, like like you said about the outhouse, we're just eating out of shit outside. That's a whole other experience. Oh man, that's great. Have you been anywhere else in Europe?
I've been to a few other places. Let's see. I've been to the Netherlands. I went there for a trip in high school, so I got to visit Amsterdam, obviously.
Mm.
And then we did like a project my senior year of high school where we went to, it's called Wageningen,
Mm-hmm.
like Wageningen,
Oh, okay.
and I don't remember um, where it is actually, but they had like a university there, and at that university they had one of the first like wave tanks where they could like simulate like waves in the
Oh yeah,
ocean.
yeah.
And so they did a lot of early testing for um like offshore wind turbines and stuff at their wave tank. And so the project that we were doing my senior year had to do with offshore wind turbines, and so we got to go visit this wave tank facility at the university there.
Wow, it's pretty cool for a school trip too. Nonetheless, can't say I've ever been blessed enough to have one that sent us to Europe, but wow, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, I got really fortunate with my schooling. I went to a very small rural school close to where I grew up. But for high school, I went to this place called the Maine School of Science and Mathematics. And basically, what it is, it's called a residential magnet school. And um, there are a few like it in the United States, but you go there and like you live in a dormitory, and you study um, while living at the school. And so, yeah, exactly. So here it is, MSSM. So it's called a magnet school, and the whole idea is that basically it's supposed to it's supposed to be for like you know like it's a public school, but you have to like apply to get in, and by some luck, like I was had an interest in mathematics, so I somehow managed to get in. And it's a really cool school because the kids that graduate from this school, they're all super smart, and they all end up going to like really good universities and stuff. I was like one of the dumbest kids there, and
Hmm.
somehow I managed to stay in. And but some of the people I graduated with are doing crazy things now. You know, like just in my graduating class, which was only like 30 people or so. There's people who are physicists, economists, mathematicians. Um, Yeah, I don't know if there's any like super famous alumni. I'm actually curious to see this.
Let's see. Oh, really? There's none? No, well, none that I could mention.
Yeah,
Okay.
it started in 1995. Um, but I guess none of us have done anything super super cool yet.
Well,
But
I mean,
no, I was
if that just started, then yeah, in a couple of years we'll start to see developments of that.
yeah, I have no doubt that some of the people I graduated with will end up being famous at some point.
That's pretty
There's
cool.
this
Only 156 students that they would allow too.
Yeah, it was really nice because um even though I was like the top performing math student in the small rural school that I went to, excuse me, when I got to this school, like all the other kids were like so far ahead of me, and I felt um so stupid, you know. And I remember the first class I went to, um my math class, I went back to my dorm room and I just like cried into my pillow because like the teacher was like covering like parabolas and stuff. He was just reviewing them on the first day of class. He's like, okay, you should all know what, y equals x squared is. Here's the
Hmm.
graph of the parabola. You should know this already. And I had only done like linear equations up until that point. So I had no idea about quadratic equations or how to graph them. So I left that class and I remember going back to my dorm room and just like crying into my pillow because I'm like, oh my God,
Oh,
I'm so stupid. Somehow I ended up at the smart kids school and I have no idea like what he was even talking about. Um, so I really struggled my first year there to kind of catch up, but there was a couple teachers who saw that I was struggling and they took the time and spent time with me like in the evenings and after class cuz like the teachers lived there too.
hmm.
And so they spent the extra time with me and got me like excited about math. Um and and then eventually like after, spending enough time getting like that private tutoring, I was able to catch up and be successful. So it was very much a transformative kind of learning experience. And and the and the the nice thing about that school is like they teach you from college level textbooks. So actually
Hmm.
when I went to university, um it felt like I didn't really have to study so hard because I had a really good foundation already.
Wow, that is really interesting. I don't really meet too many people or know too many people that have gone to schools like this. It seems to like have quite an impact on people though. I mean, I knew one guy in high school that had come from, I guess, like a similar school like this, but it was essentially like a private school where they also dormed, and I could just tell just by like uh the way that he carried himself that he was just like of a different quality of individual compared to like all the other public school kids that I went to school with. I was like, man, that system really changes people. And I mean, I of course it would. You're constantly living there, and as you said, you can have, all this extra help if you need it from your teachers, so that it's not just like, oh, here, go do this homework. If you don't understand, well, you're gonna have to either figure it out on your own or uh, hope that the teacher can like stick after class. And I'd imagine there's a lot of like there's a shared sense of camaraderie among the students since you're all kind of living there and you're seeing the same people year in year out.
Yeah, absolutely. It's totally different from a regular high school. And I'm very very like lucky that I ended up there because that those 3 years that I spent, like I didn't do freshman year there. I did sophomore through senior year, but those 3 years that I spent there totally like changed. the I guess the trajectory of my life in a way. Um, and I'm super grateful for all the teachers that kind of helped me through that.
Interesting, yeah, because I've heard of schools like these that have been popping up in the last couple of years as kind of a reaction to a lot of what's going on in the public curriculum. A lot of parents just not feeling comfortable with the direction that the public education system is going. But most of the schools that I looked at, I mean, they just had i- insane fees for entry. I mean, look, like the kids would be living there essentially like, they would be dorming. Um, they would be focusing on like, I guess, trad or like trad adjacent kind of teaching. So they would have to um, cook their own food. They would have to like clean up the bunks and everything like where they live. Um, so I guess it's kind of like a not a commune, but they would have that kind of approach to their education. But when I saw the price tag, my God, just the tuition cost alone, it costs like things like close to 10K for a year, and that's like on the high school level. Um,
Mm.
which I mean, man, that is not attainable for, for the majority of people. Um, but a system like this, like, did your parents have to like pay tuition, or was it all like it just did the application process and you were just streamlined into it?
Yeah, so because it's a public school, um, I don't think there's a tuition, but there is obviously like a room and board fee. But because my parents didn't make a lot of money, it was covered for me. Like they have like funding for students that can't afford it.
Wow, that's awesome. That's great that you
Yeah,
were able to get that opportunity that way.
yeah, and you know, it's I feel bad for people that go through like the public high school system and don't have that's so funny, that Gregory guy there, he was one of my friends, so we spent a lot of time together. It's just funny to see the picture of him pop up like that. Anyways, yeah, so like my sister, she's 10 years younger than me, and she went through the public school system, and like the teachers in the public school system, they're grossly underpaid. They have to deal with, problematic students, and they don't have a lot of resources to deal with it. And and the and so like students don't really get, the help that they need, whereas when you go to a school like this, you get all the individual help and attention you need to be successful. Even if you come in at a different level, you're kind of built up to the same level as everybody else in your class by the time you leave.
Yeah, I mean, I would certainly imagine that it's a completely different experience. Because yeah, no, as you said, like teachers are certainly underpaid, but there's also this issue that after having left the public education system, it dawned on me that a lot of the people that were instructing my classes were genuinely either unstable or mentally ill, and I don't and like I at the time it was funny because like we'd get like teachers to like flip shit or um
Right.
in some cases you'd see them cry, and it's not as if like we were throwing shit at them or like being abusive. It's just you get enough teenage boys in a room, they're gonna start causing havoc. um so it's not like they were even like bullying or harassing them. So I want to say that up front. It some of them just literally couldn't handle the pressure. I vividly remember this one time we had a teacher that she was in training. It was teaching grade 11, so I think that's I don't know if that's I don't know what that is in American terms. You guys like a sophomore, junior, all that. I don't know what that would be, but um she was teaching this class, and she at one point forgot that like whatever she was teaching, she just momentarily like just kind of lost her train of thought. And the principal was in at the time just observing the class, to see how she was doing. A student helped her out and like extended her a lifeline, and then the class kept going. principal left, and then she immediately broke down, being like, "Oh my God, they're gonna fire me. I'm gonna lose my job." And we're all just like sitting there
Oh my
as
god.
kids. We're like, "Man, first of all, not that big a deal. It's fine. You just fucked up once. It's all right." But just, I mean, man, she just opened up a side of her that we were not ready for, and it was just the most jarring thing ever. We were like, "What the fuck, man? You're the adult. You're supposed to like keep shit cool. Like, we're not supposed to see this side of you. This is not good." So yeah,
Yeah.
there were plenty of incidents like that that I saw that just it made me look back on my experience there, being like, "Wow, that's an awful system. They should really fix that."
Yeah. Yeah. I think the whole public education system in a lot of places in the states is it's really bad. The students, they're or the teachers, they're kind of geared to push students to pass like these standardized tests every year, because like the schools that do well on the standardized tests end up getting like more funding or whatever
Mm-hmm.
at the state level. And so it's the whole system is rigged to basically teach students to pass these standardized tests instead of actually like gaining knowledge, right? They're teaching them for the test. Like, this is the curriculum that's going to be on the test, so this is what you're going to learn. Here's how you answer this type of question, instead of inspiring students to be curious, to ask thoughtful questions. It's
Mm-hmm.
like, this is the curriculum, learn it. Too bad if you don't like it. So I think that's one problem. The other problem is like the salary for public school teachers is really bad. So you end up having people that spend 4 years getting a degree, and then they pass like the state level teaching certificate exam,
Mm-hmm.
and then they go to work in a public school and they're making like $40,000, um, for the first few years, and they have to live, on a very uh, tight budget, and their classroom might be underfunded. They might not have materials and stuff, so it's a very stressful situation for the teachers and for the students, I think too. So it's just not really conducive to producing students that are curious and about the world and want to explore things naturally, right? It's more like you go to school for you go to school for 8 hours, and it's kind of like a prison, for a
Mm-hmm.
lot of kids in a way. Like they're not interested, their teachers aren't inspiring, they're not learning anything that they're interested in. So it's just a really bad setup in a lot of ways.
Oh yeah, no, I could not agree more. I myself, I wanted to become a school teacher, especially after high school. I had a few of them that I was really fortunate enough to have right before they went into retirement, and some of them were of the mind of like, well, look, I'm retiring next year. I don't give a shit. I'm gonna teach the class the way that I want to, and they weren't like neglectful with it. It's not as if like they just completely wrote the year off and gave us worksheets, but they taught the classes in a way that um, went kind of off structure with the like assigned curriculum for them. But they all did it in their creative ways, and it really left a lasting impression on me. And I immediately, going into university, I thought, hell yeah, I'm gonna become a high school teacher. Fantastic, can't wait. And then once I saw what that system did to people, not just high school but like university, just I just all the different like various flaws. Like the funniest example I remember was we had a professor that was switched out of a course at the last second, literally days before the class started for whatever reason. And the person that was assigned to the class to step in was a PhD student who lived in Montreal, and our class would be from 7 till 10 p.m. He would then have to immediately run to his car and start booking it to Montreal so that he could make it in time for his morning lecture. that was in a university in Montreal. So
Oh.
naturally, he was just very like distracted in class, and the guy wasn't even a full-fledged professor. We were getting a trainee, and the whole time I'm sitting there, I'm thinking, man, I'm paying thousands of dollars to attend this class, and for fucking what? Like, this guy is not, he's not even like able to teach us properly. Most of the people like failed that class, and not because they were just stupid or they didn't care, but because he genuinely just had, I mean, no idea what he was doing. His marking scheme was like, it wasn't even percentage points or like letter grades. It was like check marks, pluses and minuses. It was the most confusing fucking thing ever, and it shocked me that someone could be getting paid to just stand there and do that, and we were willingly paying them for the privilege to do
Hmm.
that. And I just had a number of experiences like that where I was just completely turned off from it, and not to mention like how a lot of the DEI ideological grift stuff has made its way into the public education system, which is also quite concerning. I mean, I don't think I'm alone in wanting my kids to, my future kids to be homeschooled in that regard, because I don't know. Even from what you've said, there's a lot of people that share our experiences that have just had, I mean, absolutely awful teachers, or schools that were run down, didn't have proper textbooks or air conditioning. Even in some cases, it's quite the problem.
Yeah, yeah, and just to kind of touch on like the higher education system briefly too. Like, I I, I have two I have two degrees, and most of what I learned is self taught. Like a lot of
Hmm.
um, a lot of the time I spent in university was taking classes that um, really I had no interest in them. Like my math degree, uh, 4-year degree, Bachelor of Science, you needed 120 credit hours to graduate. Only 40 of those credit hours were actually math classes, right? So I spent 1/3 of my time studying things that were relevant to my interests, and 2/3 of my time taking whatever electives I could find that were remotely interesting. Thankfully, there was a professor that was doing like some philosophy classes, so I was able to actually take some interesting electives. But there was a lot of BS too. Like art, and I'm not saying art is bad. It wasn't relevant to me.
Hmm.
And like I understand the whole idea behind a liberal arts education is it's supposed to produce students that are well rounded. But a lot of like you said with the guy who was teaching that class, like the values are kind of misaligned in higher education too, right? Like those adjunct professors that teach those one-off courses, they get paid peanuts for that, so
Hmm.
there's no incentive for them to actually make it a good course, because the way that the university generates money is through research, right? So
Hmm.
it's only the tenured professors that actually make a good salary. And so if somebody's trying to break into academia and become a professor because they're truly passionate about a subject, or teaching a subject, they actually like that's not their primary focus. Their primary focus is they have to keep authoring papers, right? They have to keep
Hmm.
pushing research, because that's how the university gets money, is through these grants from the government. And so if there's no research output, the university doesn't get any money. So that's how we end up in the situation where adjunct professors teach a bunch of the entry level courses, and they're getting paid nothing to do it, and so the quality of those courses is obviously going to suffer as a result. So public school, middle school, high school has its own problems, but yeah, higher education, the values are horribly misaligned as well. And so it's really bad. Like the what you said about homeschooling is true. Like we have a 4-month-old child, and right now our plan is to homeschool our kid.
Hmm.
It's going to be extremely difficult because uh, my wife won't be able to work, like that'll be her full-time job, and so we're going to have to live off just my income. And so it's not going to be an easy thing for us to pull off, but we think it's important enough that we do it, because we don't want to just send our kid to public school and hope that they turn out okay, you know. And you're sending them away for 8 hours a day to interact with God knows who, you know. And
Hmm.
it might be some crazy teacher with crazy ideological beliefs that you just fundamentally don't agree with, or you don't want your child being exposed to, and you have zero control over it. So yeah, we're definitely going to be going the homeschool route, but it's not an easy thing to do. It's going to be challenging, but it's worth it, you know.
No, no, absolutely. I could not agree more on that. And with the post secondary system, I mean, there's just it's as you said, there's just a misalignment of incentives. Um, and I remember this one instance. I had a philosophy professor, because I pursued a liberal arts degree, and I ended up graduating with a sociology degree, which is basically toilet paper at this point, but it's fine. It is what it is. I spent my time. I did my thing. Um, but I remember he told me it was a first year course and it was quite challenging, but he was very firm with his teaching in terms of the value of how to evaluate the validity of arguments, um, going through basic logic structures, and just basic fundamentals of philosophy. Uh, it was a very difficult course because the kind of philosophy that we were taught in high school was um, not in the same like branch of philosophy, because there's quite when you get into philosophy like teaching, there's so much depth to it, not just with all the different famous names, but all the different branches of philosophy. It can get really hairy, but he essentially just taught a very basic course that a lot of people would fail or get close to failing in their first term. And that would be quite a shock to students because, they go to high school, they, show up to class, do the worksheet, get like a 60, 70% on the test, and, their grades look great. But as soon as they come to university, there's a noticeable grade drop because their expectations are not, their expectations of how difficult it is don't actually match the reality. And so this is one of the courses where people would get that kind of have that kind of reaction. And I remember speaking to him after the term, and I was like, "Look, you're like, no offense, like you're really smart. I don't understand why you're teaching this basic course. Like you could be easily doing like senior level courses. I don't understand. Like what is it that's keeping you here? Like, do you really just enjoy it?" And he's like, "No, to tell you the truth, man, I'm not a fan of it at all. But the way that the university ranks professors is there after every single course they give you a little worksheet that allows you to indicate um, how well you think the professor was in teaching, how relevant you think the class material was to the actual course. It was essentially like a report card. We'd be able to rank them. Um, and he told me that because people would be faced with lower grades upon finishing his course than what they were expecting, they would essentially have this resentment for him and mark him lower because they're like, oh, why the fuck did he grade me less? Why the fuck did he, give me this grade? And as a result, the university would see that and be like, oh, well, he's not doing well enough to improve the average of the graduates. So we are going to just keep him here in the course and he can't move up and teach anything else. Which I would understand if like he was legitimately a bad professor, but this guy was like he was smart. He was smart, he was witty. His classes were actually like really insightful if you paid attention, but because it's a first year entry course that everybody had to do in the liberal arts, you just got this mishmash of people that like most of them were on their phones or shopping online or whatever the fuck. Most people just didn't pay attention to the course. Um, so it was just yet another one of those incidents where I was like, man, that's a really broken, like fundamentally important system right there, because you're essentially giving feedback to the university of how we feel about the professor, but it's not actually representative of his talent. You just resent him because you're failing. Like that's not his fault. That's your fault.
Yeah, yeah. I remember my intro to philosophy course, and basically it was we had like this anthology of it was like a book that was like an anthology of philosophical works, up through um, from Plato, like up to Descartes, and then into
Mm-hmm.
like modern philosophers. And that course blew me away because I had never read um, like philosophy writings before, and it took me by surprise how challenging it was, because you actually have to like activate your like you have to turn on your brain, and you have to think really hard, and you have to like read what's written, and then you have to read it like three more times before you understand it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I would venture to say like a lot of people were in that course had no interest in philosophy, and and we're probably surprised by how dense some of these works are, because yeah, I mean, I enjoyed it because the first time I read it I was like I have no idea what this says, and then I'd have to like spend some time like reading it very slowly, and trying to understand each sentence, and being like, okay, I think I kind of understand what it is they're trying to say. So I think everybody should take a philosophy course. It'll make you kind of level up on your reading comprehension. You'll definitely learn a few new ideas, and it'll better prepare you to like orient yourself in the world, and kind of come to your own conclusions about what's right and what's not. So
Oh yeah, it's one of the few it's one of the few disciplines that's extremely humbling, because the work itself, like the mechanical act of like thinking about philosophy or like writing about it, is not actually difficult. It's as you said, it's the mental power that you need to like really like reread something 10 times, and you're like, "Oh, now I understand a portion of it." Like just I'm just getting like the most surface level understanding of it, and then you have to dig even deeper. Yeah, it can get extremely convoluted, but it's a great course to kind of humble yourself on. Um, but yeah, in the on that spirit, I actually just remembered there was another issue that I believe it was actually Jordan Peterson that pointed it out. With universities, they have all those boards of professors that would run a lot of the policy making for the university, and help set the curriculums. And I remember I even spoke to a professor about this, and he basically told me that some of the people that were setting up a lot of the rules for curriculums, and how all these boards govern themselves, they were professors that were not tenured, so their focus wasn't on research. Their focus was just simply on teaching their classes, and because they had all this free time, they would then dedicate it to coming on to all these different admin boards. But because they themselves are in a way separated from the professors that are actually doing the hard work, they just end up making policies that benefit themselves or benefit their ideological goals. And then the professors that are actually doing the work are so busy with everything, they can't, they don't have time to attend all these different board
mm,
meetings or to vote or to do any of these things. So what ends up happening is, at least in my university where I went, there was a lot of policies and different like just changes that were made that actually had no bearing in reality. It was to satisfy like an ideological goal of theirs, um, which is just very strange because it fundamentally just kind of poisoned the well in a sense. Because the people that were
mm,
actually like getting affected by these changes, they didn't have a say in them, and the people that were making the changes couldn't exactly be removed. And it's just this compounding cycle where it just everything just gets blown out of proportion, and the whole thing just starts to degrade. I mean, especially towards the end. I remember I took a feminist class, um, because I needed the credit to graduate, and and my professor, uh, I remember the what's it called the curriculum that they had, because feminism fundamentally the idea is actually it's not to focus on women, even though the name kind of implies that. The definition of it is to focus on the equality of genders, and to look on both
right.
sides. As it's not supposed to be just men, or sorry, it's not supposed to be just women. And the only lecture that they did on men was the rate of sexual assault that of like men raping women, and like none like no part of it was talking about how uh difficult paternity cases are for men going to courts, or all the cases of men actually being assaulted by their partners. Like that was the only the only section for men, and I was just sitting there in the class being like, okay, well, that's kind of fucked. Like I thought you were supposed to be equal here. What the hell's going on? Like why are we having
Hmm.
this ideological slant? I don't understand. Aren't we supposed to be in the place to have these uncomfortable discussions and to have this actually play out in the classroom? I guess not.
Yeah, yeah. I'm fundamentally, against, um, I guess this new age of, or this new ideology of, like, a lot of people call it, I guess, like Marxist ideology, right?
Mm-hmm.
You hear people refer to it as that, and I guess in a way it is. I'm just I'm fundamentally opposed to examining things through, um, the lens of, like, class warfare, or like,
Mm-hmm.
um, viewing the world that way. I think that everybody should be treated equally when it comes to policies. Like, if you make any policy that, um, kind of puts one, favors one class of people over another, that policy is inherently exclusionary.
Mm-hmm.
And so my thinking on it is, like, everybody should be treated equally under the law. Like, we live in a society, and the purpose of a society is to provide, like, or the purpose of, like, a government, I would say, is to provide, uh, stability, peace, and provide, the opportunity for people to be prosperous through that stability and that peace. And so, um, yeah, like, I guess you could call me anti woke or whatever. Like, I don't believe in the victim mentality. I think it's a cop out when people say, like, I'm oppressed, or uh you know uh, my people are oppressed. Like,
Mm-hmm.
sure, there have been many great injustices throughout the course of human history. We can all acknowledge that. But to say that, that living in America in the year 2025, for example, that you don't have endless opportunities to succeed, it's a cop out. Like, I got into uh, a discussion, because sometimes I post in slightly inflammatory things on Twitter, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, or X, that now it's called X. And so I follow this one account called Unusual Whales, which posts, like, things about, economics, or things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And it was talking, one of their recent posts was, like, talking about tipping culture, and I just commented on it. I was like, yeah, I'm not tipping the sandwich artist at Subway for doing
Yeah.
their job,
Yeah.
right? And then somebody, took great offense to that and was like, yeah, like, fuck that guy making 7.25 an hour. And, the whole gist of her argument was that not everybody has the same opportunity. And and my response to that was, actually, books are pretty much free, right? Like, you can get internet access for free at a library. Books are pretty much free. And now with the Chat GPT, like, free tier, you can pretty much teach yourself anything you want to learn, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Uh and she was saying, like, people with college degrees are privileged, and I'm like, college is a scam. Like, I have 2 degrees, and it's a scam. Like, you don't actually, anything useful that you want to learn, you can learn it on your own by using
Mm-hmm.
the internet. Like, everything, mostly everything that I've learned is through YouTube, which is free. Anything you want to learn about, you can learn about it on YouTube. Um, and so my whole argument was, if someone is stable enough to hold down a job at Subway, then they have, uh, endless opportunities to them. You know, they can go to the library, use the internet, research anything, learn anything. They can learn a hard skill. You know, they can they shouldn't go to college. Like my opinion now is that the higher education system is pretty much totally messed up, and that people, until that is like fixed, or there's some like alternative, like people shouldn't go get a 4 year degree just for the sake of getting a 4 year degree. You could spend that 4 years of your life actually learning like a useful skill that's in demand, and then eventually get paid for it, right?
Hmm.
If you get good enough at it, you can get paid for it. So um yeah, so my whole rebuttal to her was like, you know, you're telling me that someone has enough skill and enough work ethic to work at Subway and they can't better themselves. Like, I don't buy that. You know, if they want to learn something else, learn a useful skill, they can do that. If they can hold down a job at Subway, they can figure out how to use ChatGPT and how to use YouTube to teach themselves whatever it is they want to know. So I don't buy the argument that people are oppressed in the United States or in Canada especially. Um, I think the United States and Canada are two amazing countries with endless opportunities for anybody that wants to work hard. So yeah, I don't buy the victim argument. I just don't.
No, absolutely, and I'm right there with you. I was naturally just being in a sociology program. I saw a lot of the inception around that idea, and it was really disheartening to me to see so many of my peers and my university, in effect, buy into such a self-defeating ideology. Because here, I mean, I saw so much potential around me and all these people, and it was all just wasted on, exalting this rage for generational wrongdoings, for things that happened when they weren't even alive, when we live in one of the most prosperous, not only times, but in one of the most prosperous areas of the world, where, as you said, the opportunity is limitless. I mean, shit, if you're really bold about it, you could just go to university lectures. Like, you could just walk in. If they're not taking roll call,
That's
if there's
true.
enough people, you could literally, like, there's nothing stopping you. As long as there's no, like, ID at the gate or whatever. Like, most universities are not like that. You can literally just walk into a class. And if you get kicked out, okay, so you get kicked out. And then you walk out and you go to the next one. Or MIT has entire courses on YouTube, Khan Academy, Code Academy. I mean, there is no end to the resources that are available to people now. So long as, like, if you have all your limbs intact and you're not like sick perpetually and you're not having to subsist on some kind of medication for the rest of your life, which the majority of people, they're not in that kind of situation. They're not, blind, stricken, and dumb. There's a lot of people that like really do have so much more opportunity to them than they really know, and it is a real shame that that ideology gets in the way of all that, and people start having these, in my opinion, fruitless debates over right and wrong and fair and not, and trying to write this weird, like, cosmological sense of right and wrong in the world by going out and protesting, or just absolutely just wasting their time with bullshit. um it really gets in the way of actual progress and bettering yourself in life, and seeing that be propped up in universities is just the most, it really blackpilled me during my time.
Mm.
It was really, it put me in a really bad place because I bought into it. I was told, you go to university, you're going to be surrounded by some of the smartest people that have, that share your interest and that thirst for knowledge, and that, want to collaborate and have all these great discussions and work on these projects. And then when I saw like a fraction of that, I was like, "Oh, this is a joke. This is like fake." Like,
Hmm.
why did my university allow the Church of Scientology to come in and rent out space during
Wow.
our mental health week?
Wow.
Like we would have a week before exams where students would essentially have all these extra services open to them. They had a place where you could go and be swarmed by puppies. Like it was just like a cute little thing that some students set up with the local shelter. Or they had like yoga classes where people could drop in for free. All that kind of stuff to focus on mental health. And at that time, they allowed the Church of Scientology to buy out space in a very prominent area inside the university, which was such a slap in the face to students. I mean, you're letting those people come in and prey on all of these, people that are in the weirdest state in their lives, especially right before exams, where they're all just not hanging on by a thread, but they're living on Red Bull essentially and getting 5 hours of sleep. And you're inviting this predatory ideology to come in and essentially take advantage of that. It was stuff like that that I would see that I was like, this is insane. This is like actually a fucking scam. Like, why did I spend all my years here? This is crazy. Um, since then, I've thankfully I've obviously not black pilled, but yeah, it really threw me for a loop just seeing um how captured some people were ideologically and just how that poisoned the whole thing to its root. I'm glad to be out of it now,
Hmm.
and I'm glad to have the experience and the lessons I learned from it. But yeah, it's in a pretty sorry state, and it really has been illuminating to see all these people graduate and then go out into the real workforce, and then when their ideology actually meets the real world and it's not compatible, just seeing all that blow up has been very entertaining to say the least.
Mm. Yeah. 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 I think of all the people. I think what the most popular 4-year degree, at least at some point in the past, was like a Bachelor of Science in Psychology or something like that.
Hmm.
Uh, and it is funny to think, like a lot of people when they heard I was doing a degree in mathematics were like, what are you going to become, a teacher? Like no, like I have no desire to go into higher education, and I have no desire to work like in the public school system. Like maybe if I worked at a private school, like I do enjoy like teaching. So but a lot of people were like saying like, what are you going to do with a math degree? And I was like, it doesn't like the degree is not the thing that's important, right? It's like the skills you learn.
Hmm.
And I'm actually super happy that I did the math degree and that I ended up in like in the world of software, because like when it comes to working on problems that require some sort of mathematical reasoning, like I already have that, uh so I'm I I've come at it from like a different angle with the math education. But um, yeah, like during university, I worked like 3 jobs,
Hmm.
and one of the jobs that I worked was working on radios. And by working, in that job, and I was very passionate about electronics. That's what allowed me to come to Canada and start building my life here. And working in the startup scene in Canada is what helped me kind of move into the world of software. So, really, the degree is just, it's really just like an expensive receipt at this point that says,
Hmm.
like, this person is going to show up for work consistently, and maybe it doesn't even say that, but it at least shows that you can, I guess, stick to something consistently for 4 years. But that's really all it is. Like a 4-year psychology degree with nothing else isn't going to get you a job anywhere. Like you have to be doing something outside of university. You have to be building some sort of skills to
Hmm.
actually become employable. Like that whole narrative of like just go get a 4-year degree and you're gonna be successful is not true. You have to get a 4-year degree and be a motivated person who's like working on their skills and developing themselves at the same time. So, but yeah, like the the women's studies, the gender studies degrees, like that, I feel bad for those people. They got sucked into this terrible world with a terrible terrible philosophy, and now they have, they have nothing to show for it. Um, and yeah, I one of the things that I'm hopeful about is that it seems like culture is kind of shifting now. It seems like the pendulum is kind of swinging the other way, and
Hmm.
people are tired of the lies that they've been fed by the media for the last 10 plus years about DEI, about equality, about all these things that really at their core are just manufactured to create more division amongst people.
Hmm.
And so it seems like to me that culture is kind of shifting, and that's really prevalent on X. You see a lot of people who are just totally like don't listen to the mainstream media anymore and are thinking for themselves and are digesting and consuming media from independent media sources. And so that makes me super hopeful on the future. And I one of I think one of the biggest challenges, like the U.S. and Canada, that they face are dealing with the establishment media complex. Because to me, like when you turn on Fox News and when you turn on CNN, they're the exact same thing. They're two sides of the same coin, right?
Hmm.
Like um, Fox is just appealing to one half of the country, and CNN is appealing to the other half of the country. But the sensationalist headlines that they both push kind of work to keep the country divided into two. And so I hope that um, I hope that something will be done about the press. Now, obviously, um, like United States has a lot of protections for the free press, right? And so you to attack these media companies in the eyes of many would be to attack free press, right? So how do you deal with that problem where you have these corporations which disseminate news to millions of people, um, but do so in a way that's for profit, and the thing that drives that profit is sensationalist headlines or narratives that kind of divide people or keep people divided. So I don't really know what the answer is to that or how you would begin to attack that problem, but it's the thing that gives me hope is a lot of the younger people, like millennials and younger, are kind of able to see through it and have become very disillusioned with the mainstream media,
Hmm.
and recognize that a lot of what they've been told is just outright false, or excuse me, or is kind of twisting the truth in some way. Um, but then I look at like people that are older, like 50 and older, and my sense is that these people still trust the mainstream media because they come from a generation where like you could trust the news anchors on TV, what they were telling you, and so they still see like CNN as a reputable source, right?
Hmm.
So I don't know how to fix that other than it seems like a good thing. Like the younger people are kind of moving away from
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure that there is a single fix for it, just by nature of how large of a problem it is. But um, to just kind of tie the 2 points that we've been talking about together, what comes to my mind is not maybe a fix, but um, a method through which we can find a fix somehow would be the best way that I could put it is active participation. Because as you said, we can't rely on the guardrails that have been set up for the longest time. Like we can't just expect to go into university, get your degree, then you come out and you have like an amazing job. It's as you said, you have to work on projects on the side. You have to make an impact on the people that you're studying with, so that you can actually have connections that can serve you when you get out of university. You have to actually, actively pursue like other jobs. You'll have to be working throughout your time in university. It's not something that you can just simply passively participate in, like show up to class, go to the exam, get your degree, party, whatever, move on. That'll work in some disciplines where you'll be able to get like a mid-range job or something, um, and just kind of, be a drone for however long you can last through that. But realistically,
Mm.
people that want to be successful and that want to build something, and the kind of spirit that we should ultimately be fomenting in university, this curiosity and thirst for knowledge and wanting to build great things, that all comes from active participation. And
Mhm.
like yourself, I learned that firsthand. I was actually not in university. It was when I during COVID, I made the great idea. After having gone through university, I thought, "Fuck it, I'll go to college. Let's see, let's see what that'll do." And I pursued a business degree. Um, I only stayed in it for a year, then I dropped out because I just realized that I was completely done with post secondary. But anyways, long story short, I was in a business class, and my professor had said that during the winter break, that he found an opportunity for someone to intern at a company. And myself, had never having had any kind of business experience, I thought, fuck it, why not? It's a couple months. I can do that while I'm in school because schooling was all online during COVID. I'll get some experience under my belt. We'll see what happens. I ended up joining a startup where I did a lot of operations for them, calling clients, calling users, helping troubleshooting, and all that. And then eventually I ended up working for them for I think it was almost a year that I lasted there until I left. Um, but it was because like I had sought out experience. I had tried to do something extra on top of that. It was only through that I was able to find that opportunity. Nobody's gonna walk into my door and be like, hey, here's a job for you. Like you
Mm.
have to put yourself out there. You have to actually do stuff on the side. um and yeah, that ties together also with what you said about the rise of independent media and what's happening with the news. It's no longer enough to just simply turn on the TV and put trust in your anchors that they are going to tell you the truth, nothing but the truth, and that there will be no spin or any ideological drivel, or any kind of narrative behind it that is not actually beneficial to you. That's not sustainable anymore. Maybe it worked back then when they had like 5 newspapers, and 7 TV channels, but in a world like today where anyone can be a reporter with their phone or a GoPro, it's not feasible anymore because now anyone can upend a narrative with the right leaked audio or picture or what have you, and then it
Mhm.
sends the media into a frenzy of panic. um, and I'm right there with you in terms of seeing the pendulum swing. I'm really hopeful for what's going to happen in the next 5-10 years, as we start to move away from a lot of these systems because they've outserved their purpose. It's not sustainable anymore to run these kind of platforms. Um, and no matter how many times they say like, "Oh my God, we live in such divisive times," it's like, yeah, but you're directly responsible for it. What do you like? What do you mean? You can't just you don't get to make this mess and then pretend to be a spectator of it. Like you actively
Mhm.
participated in it. Come on, like let's call a spade a spade. All right, we know you have to sell ads. We know you have to be divisive. Okay, fine. If you want to do that as a business model, by all means. But like, don't pretend that you're some kind of like you're separated by it somehow. Like, no, you're directly involved in it.
Yeah. 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 I I wonder. I've thought about this a lot. I often wonder, like, what would be like the legislative solution to these to dealing with these large media companies, and I don't know. I really don't know, but um I think X is a great platform. Obviously, there's a lot of people on here that push the same narrative as the mainstream media.
Hmm.
There's also a lot of people who, um, a lot of smaller media sources that do their own reporting and bring a different perspective to the table. And so, I don't think I don't think it's a perfect system, but what you can do on X is you can kind of find the sources that you choose to trust, right? and you know, you can look at what they're saying. You can come to your own conclusion about if this person has, you know, has any bias, what kind of bias it is, and you can kind of curate your feed
Hmm.
so that you're getting your news from sources that you trust, which is amazing. Uh, I really want to show it to like my father-in-law, but he is so captivated by CNN. You know, what he does is after he comes home from work and has his supper, he turns on CNN and he watches it for 2 hours, and so he's constantly enraged, right? Because
Hmm.
the news he hears from CNN is always uh, you know, created in a way to, like, you know, get people fired up and keep them captivated, and so he's constantly enraged by all the terrible things that are going on, and sometimes I want to shake him and be like, look, it's like you can't believe everything that you hear from CNN. Like you need to like check out other news sources, you know. So I've talked to him about making an X account, but he won't do it because Elon is the devil, because Trump is the devil, and now Elon's associated with Trump. So by transitive property, Elon is now the devil. So he can't bring himself past that. Um,
Yeah,
yeah, ground
that's
ground I was just gonna say you just pull up ground news. I've heard about that, and I've never actually checked it out, but I wonder how their assessments are. Have you used this?
Yeah, I was actually going to mention because your story is one that I mean there's millions of people across not just North America but the world that are seeing the way their parents consume media and are just having a really difficult time getting them to transition um, to at least like incorporate at least some more facts about the other side because getting having your emotions be allowing you to be emotionally hijacked by news is something that is very easy to fall prey to and I totally understand the
Yeah.
sentiment of how people fall prey to it like I myself I was captured during COVID you know just because you're shut in for most of the day and you know you go online and you see all this stuff I was very not very easily, but I just very thoroughly captured by all this stuff. I'll tell you that much, because it is like it's all made to manufacture all this. I don't know, just this resentment and all these very strong emotions. It makes you feel like it's the end of the world if one issue swings one way or another ideologically. When in reality,
Hmm.
once you step out the door, 99% of that shit doesn't matter because the road is still there. You know, the grocery store is still there. Your friends are still there. It's not the end of the world. But I was just pulling up ground.news as an example of something that could be used as an intermediary step to kind of, you know, allow them, the people that are captured by this stuff to be at least introduced to a different perspective. So, um, the way that this platform works is, let's say I just want to like you know read a news story about some new Canadian politic development. Um, what it does is it'll give me a basic you know analysis of the story with some basic facts at the beginning that are scoured using some kind of LLM AI for it. And then if you scroll down, you'll actually see the links to all the publications that have written about this story. So you can go and read it for yourself. You don't necessarily have to rely on this analysis. You can simply just go down and be like, all right, I want to read CNN's take on this, or I want to read CBC's take on this, or what have you. And so it allows you to see the actual articles themselves. So even if you don't trust the analysis, like okay, by all means, you can go here. And they also do a rating where they check the bias and the leanings of these publications. And some stories will naturally have more coverage on the left. Some other stories will have more coverage on the right. Sometimes it's even 50-50. And they're not 100% accurate, but it is a fairly decent assessment to just kind of make sure that you're not in the blind spot of the news coverage of a story. So it's a little bit more in depth. It's not as sexy as or easy as sitting down and watching CNN and have them read the news to you with all their fancy graphics and everything. But for anyone that consumes the news through text, Ground.news is a free to use platform that I highly encourage everyone to use. You can make an account. There's even a subscription basis that gives you like kind of more in-depth analysis about the bias of each of the stories. And I believe this is, let me just see, because they do have a Twitter page. They are still fairly unknown. I don't even think they have, get 40K followers. That's not bad. And they're actually number 4 on the App Store. That's great. So yeah,
Oh wow.
highly recommend using it. It's just a great tool, like just to give you a little summary of it. And they also have an extension so that every time you visit a website, like let's say if I go on CNN, um, I don't know if it'll load it up for me, but there's usually like a bar on top of your browser that actually oh yeah, there it is. So it tells you what the bias breakdown is of the news stories, so that maybe instead of just going on ground.news, you can just download the extension and then you have it there for you ready to go.
Cool. Yeah, I've seen ads for this, and that might be a good thing for something, or for somebody like my father-in-law, where he just you know, only consumes news from from one company. So it might be a good gift idea for him, because he loves staying up to date on the news. You know, that's kind of
Mm.
his hobby, right? It's just a shame that he only consumes it from one company. So it would be good to get him something like this.
Yeah, and they do have a subscription basis. I'm just trying to see. Um, yeah, so they have different plans. The one goes as low as $3 Canadian, which is probably like a dollar or something US. So like that's cheap as all hell, and yeah, it just gets you a lot more insight into all that. But I also wanted to highlight. This is actually from another interview guest that I had the other day. It's from Jason Baseman. He's working on a platform with this other guy. It's called Boundless Discovery, and this might not be applicable maybe to your situation, but just as like a little highlight here, um, what they essentially want to build is a platform where for major stories that like go into extreme detail in regards to who was where and what ties certain companies have to each other, or just this like
Mm.
intricate web of um, story that happens with all these scandals and everything. They wanted to build a platform that could essentially help you visualize what that looks like by creating all these different nodes. And right now, each of these here, it's not clickable. They have to manually fill them in, or I'm pretty sure they have some kind of LLM that helps with that. But they eventually want to get it so that you can click on these little captions around here that feature little sections of each story. That'll give you the source, and you could even go deeper into the node and see what other relations it has. So they want to build a huge platform around all this. Right now, it's still in the preliminary stage, but they do have a newsletter where they use this platform that they're building to cover all these different stories. So they did one about the Arctic recently, and then also the alliance between North Korea and Russia, um, big tech going nuclear. So they have a newsletter that I think they do it once a week, where they go in depth into a single story. But just something I figured I'd throw out there.
That's super cool. I think I'm following him already, but I had no idea that he was working on this, so I will definitely check that out.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what they build because one of the things that Jason highlighted to me in our interview was he said that when you read the news, just as a news story, you're really relying on the author and the editors to essentially guide you through it. So you're hoping that their political bias or their coverage of the story or the political alignments that their publication has with the government or what other bodies, what have you. You're relying on all of those separate layers to filter the story in a way that allows you to get at the truth or as close to the truth as you can. And that's a lot of trust and faith that you're putting in that person, that institution. um, and they might be incentivized to leave certain things out or to over exaggerate some things. And reading it through that kind of story narrative base, it's not as informative of an approach in terms of trying to get at the truth or try to attain information as something like this. Because here with the web, I can just
Mhm.
simply go, okay, well, I'm actually really interested in this aspect of the story all the way over here. I want to see, what kind of impact it has on the whole landscape of it and dig deeper into it. Whereas with a text-based article, it's like, well, you're just kind of left with whatever it is that the author wrote, and now it's up to you to do your own investigation, and that's just time and resources that is spent, that could be spent doing something else. Whereas this, it actually allows you to get at the heart of, whatever information it is that you're seeking, which is it's a very different
Right.
way of telling the news.
Yeah. No, this is a phenomenal idea. I mean, for people that are interested in kind of finding out more uh, about a story, that seems like a really great way to do that.
Yeah, no, I can't wait till they actually come out with the main platform. I'm certainly definitely going to be using it for my own purposes because they also want to get it to the point where they have people making their own. So it's not just the kind of stories that they publish because, ultimately they are only two people that are working on this and they don't have, an understanding of every single field of the news, whether it's with the economy or tech or, what have you. And they're actually Canadian. So, you know, more to that.
Awesome. Yeah, I love Canada. I should be a citizen in the next few months. I did my time on the work permit, and then I got a permanent resident status, and I applied for my citizenship in December. So, if everything goes smoothly, I should be a Canadian citizen sometime in the next couple of months. So I'm super pumped about that.
That's great, man. That's good. That's great to hear. You came at a weird time. I'll tell you that much. Out of all the times to come that you could have picked, at the start of COVID, you came at a really really weird time. It wasn't always like this, okay? It wasn't always this crazy. Um, Things were fine, but yeah, we find ourselves in a very very interesting place right now with Canada. Which is funny that you moved here right as America's about to annex. So like you're literally like several kilometers away from the border, and you might as well be back home at this point.
I know, I know. When Trump started talking about annexing Canada, I was like, great. I put in all this work to become a citizen of Canada, and he's just gonna turn it into the United States. But either way, like I think Canada's a great country. I think the United States is a great country. If they become one country, it doesn't really matter to me. I think we have a good thing going on here in North America, and I'm grateful to live in this part of the world. Yeah, let's just put it like that.
Yeah, no, Canada's pretty great, man. The amount of natural wilderness that we have, um, the some of the urban centers, not all, and certain sections of them are fantastic to go and see. Or even just like on the East Coast, they often get forgotten about. But yeah, it's a hell of a place, and I'm right there with you in recognizing that there's just so much untapped potential, so much possibility that we have access to here that you just don't elsewhere in the world. That even though it might not be, uh, you know, the greatest that it can be right now, that there is just so much room for improvement. And with the acceleration of technology and how all these old systems are dying and the pendulum is swinging, it's just it's like you can feel it in the air. There's just this air of possibility.
Absolutely. I'm super fortunate with my day job because um I'm working at a startup where we're basically building software to kind of solve some of the challenges in the Canadian healthcare system. And so New Brunswick is actually um, kind of leading the charge in augmenting parts of like the universal healthcare system with public options, and that's really awesome because I don't know how it is in other provinces, but in New Brunswick, uh, the branch of the government that runs the hospitals over here have done a very poor job at managing the system,
Mm-hmm.
and I think some of that comes down from the federal level, but uh, a lot of it happens at the provincial level too, and the way it works is so about 40 minutes north of me there's a hospital, and about 40 minutes south of me there's a hospital in Fredericton, New Brunswick. And the hospital in Fredericton, New Brunswick, so Fredericton is the capital of New Brunswick, and it's like the biggest, I think it's the biggest city in New Brunswick. Moncton might be bigger, I'm not sure, but you go to the emergency room there, and you could be waiting anywhere from like 3 to 16 hours to get in to see a doctor, and like unless you're like dying of a heart attack, or you're pregnant, or you're meet some of those high risk criteria or whatever, you're going to be sitting in the waiting room for an exceptionally long time. And actually, I think in the last couple of years that they've even had somebody like die in the waiting room
Oh yeah.
at the Fredericton Hospital. So it and uh, it's really bad because they can't keep doctors. They can't keep doctors in this province. They because they're overworked. Like the ER doctors have to work like crazy shifts.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, they've shut down several hospitals. They've reduced the hours of several hospitals in New Brunswick as well. And the problem is just getting worse and worse. So I'm like, when we talk about hope or optimism for the future, like things, even if things seem really bad on that front, uh, like things are changing, like the government is becoming more open to working with different like private options, and kind of augmenting the public service because they just can't keep up.
Mm-hmm.
Uh so so yeah, I have a lot of hope, for Canada as a whole. Like just in Fredericton has a really big startup culture, and several big like multinational companies have been formed in Fredericton, and many have like offices there too. So um, like Canada. I remember watching an interview with Kevin O'Leary, and he's a pretty famous Canadian,
Oh yeah.
and super rich, very successful business guy. Uh, Appeared on Shark Tank and all that stuff. And he Kevin O'Leary's like super bullish on Canada too. He talked about how there's just so much opportunity for businesses to grow here, despite all the like the high taxation rates, and despite all the um, kind of roadblocks that you face with certain like governmental policies and stuff. Like
Mm-hmm.
despite all that, there's still so much opportunity for Canada to grow, and so I believe that. I think Canada, the U.S. and Canada, uh, are gonna grow tremendously in the next couple decades. And kind of tying it back to AI, I was having a discussion on Spaces with Daywan. I don't know if you know him, but he
Mm-hmm.
he runs like the burger burger posting community. Uh, yeah, Dawon, Daywan.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I know them. Yeah.
Yeah, so he was running a space, and we were talking about AI, and we were talking about how like it feels like LLMs have kind of plateaued a little bit, right? Like OpenAI is generating all this hype to get more money, but really like they haven't released anything new or exciting. Like they just
Hmm.
released like this tasks feature the other day, and it's literally just like a cron job, you know. And it there's so they're really like hyping it up, but it almost feels like the that LLM technology is kind of plateaued, and throwing more compute at it isn't really producing um, any like substantial advancements. So
Hmm.
I'm I'm curious to see how long it's going to be before uh, the next big breakthrough in like model architecture comes, and there's like a step change in the capabilities of LLMs. You know, I think people are building like agents and stuff, but I'm not super sold on like the whole concept of agents, because basically like you can fine tune models and kind of like make them work on a team and talk to each other to like solve some sort of complicated problem, but at the end of the day it's just LLMs kind of like talking back and forth to each other, and eventually like one of them makes a mistake and the whole thing goes off the rails. So like, you know, once I see an agent that can like run for a week and do something productive for like a week straight without human intervention, then I think that'll be something substantial. But all like the agent stuff that I've played with so far, it's like you try to set it up to do something, and it'll inevitably break because it's just LLMs talking back and forth to each other, and eventually something like the context window gets too big and something messes up, and then like it goes off the rails, you know. Um so I guess my whole point was like people worried about uh AI taking their jobs or whatever, or AGI. Like, I'm not really worried about that. Like, I don't think we're gonna have AGI for decades and decades still, you know. And by AGI, I mean like something that can run and act independently and autonomously, kind of like a human, right?
Hmm.
And doesn't necessarily require human intervention for it to like keep doing its thing. Like right now, no matter what you build with LLMs, eventually something messes up, right? And it requires human intervention. So the people that are worried about AI taking their jobs, I say to them, well, like learn some more useful skills other than like copying stuff in and out of an Excel spreadsheet. You know, like yes, people are building tools right now that are going to automate like those really boring tasks of data extraction, data
Hmm.
manipulation, stuff that doesn't necessarily require a lot of original thought. But to say like AI is going to replace a software developer anytime in the next 10, 20 years is crazy, I think. Because you know, like a software developer has to, first of all, has to have, you know, broad knowledge, which LLMs do, but they also have to be able to kind of solve different problems from a lot of different domains. You know, like show me an AI agent that can create a Cloudflare account, program, you know, a serverless web app, deploy it on Cloudflare, you know, and set up monitoring and logging and do all this. Like nothing like that exists yet, you know. So I'm super hopeful about the future because I don't think AI is gonna, you know, is gonna take over everyone's job anytime soon, and I'm not really worried about that. So, people who are black pilled on AI, you shouldn't be black pilled because I think those kinds of things, you know, those kinds of AI tools or AGI are so far down the road, like decades down the road, before it'll completely transform how society works, you know, or the kinds of people that have jobs, you know. And if you're worried about AI taking your job, like level up your skills, learn how to do something that an AI agent can't do yet. You know what I mean? Or learn how to do something that requires human input.
No,
Sorry, that was
absolutely.
my rant about AI.
No, no, by all means, man. I loved hearing your perspective on it, and I do share your vision in that regard. But just to touch on the healthcare thing before we get into that, uh, I in Ontario we face kind of this similar issues regarding wait times and all that. And just now, actually, there was a news story that showed a doctor's office opening up. Let me see if I can find it. Doctor's office, huge lines, Canada, recent opening news story. It had opened up, and literally the day that it was open to take on new clients, they had. Here it is. Yeah, this is a CTV story. Uh, yeah, it literally happened just days ago. It was in Midwestern Ontario in this place called so the Walkerton, outside the Walkerton Legion, which is the hospital. Let me see if I can find it here. Yeah, so this is literally, I mean, that town can't have more than a couple thousand people, I'd say, and this is in. Oh yeah, this is like way far out. I mean, the closest town. Yeah, so they had hundreds of people outside in the snow, just waiting to see a doctor because there are plenty of stories of people just, I mean, waiting months and months and months for procedures, um, and some people even dying in the ER, which is absolutely tragic. So I'm really excited to see what an impact AI and all these new systems will make, like the kind of stuff that you guys are working on there, and not even just AI, but just updating this infrastructure to better accommodate our system, because at the end of the day we should not have people fucking dying in ERs. That's absolutely disgraceful, an insane way to run a healthcare system, to say the least. But more to your point about the landscape of it all, as much as I want to, you know, embrace this doomerism kind of approach to it and say like this is going to wipe out so many jobs, I'm of the same mind as you in that I believe at the end of the day it's going to be up to the people that, uh, as the meme goes, that are the idea guys, right? That because it's going to be so easy to execute and so so accessible with the kind of AI tools that we're going to be seeing pop up in the mainstream in the next couple of years, that at that point it just, all it takes is for someone to have a vision. All it takes is for someone to have a sense of taste, a
Hmm.
sense of style, an idea of like the actual architecture behind building something, whether it is something digital like a website, or even in the maker space, you know, working with 3D printers and having your own kind of manufacturing setup at home. Um, the amount of leverage that we're gonna open up for people to enable their own creative capabilities is nothing short of extraordinary. I mean, this is like the industrial revolution on steroids, except now we're
Mm.
not going to have children working in sweatshops and people breathing in smog. We're just going to see this massive explosion of coming from the people that are able to harness the best of this technology to their aims, which is insane. I mean, one person that kind of comes to mind, not really related to AI, but just with the kind of technology we have access to. It was this girl that I interviewed this past Monday. She's working on um, this 3D printer platform where essentially you could sign up your 3D printer to be a node in the network, and so that if it's just simply going unused in your garage and you know you're just not, you know, working it 24/7, someone could essentially sign up on the platform and say, hey, I need this kind of specific piece for, let's say, like these prosthetic limbs that I'm building. And I just, you know, that person doesn't have the printer or they don't have the material. And somebody that's on that network can see this request and be like, oh, okay, I can fulfill that, no problem. And there's also a monetary incentive attached to it because the person would obviously be getting compensated for that. The platform would
Hmm.
take like a percentage point so that just so that they can keep the lights on. But it would essentially open up a huge, um, like massive amounts of printing capabilities for people that would otherwise not have access to it. You know, instead of having to set up your own base in your garage or where have you with multiple printers, you could now outsource this to multiple people across the globe, mind you, with designs that are also available online for anyone to make or edit or what have you. Um, and yeah, just the way that she was explaining this network to me, it really put into perspective the capabilities of harnessing such a network, in a way that unused resources could actually be put to better use, in a way that actually compensates both the person that's asking for the order, but the person that's also making it. Now that's just one example that I wanted to throw out there. And she, mind you, she's only 19. Like this girl coming out of high school, I don't even think she went to college, is having these kind of ideas, which is incredible. Like when I was 19, I didn't fucking I wasn't thinking about stuff like this or building it.
Yeah.
Which I look, it's not a generational thing. That's just a me thing. Um,
Yeah.
but it was
Yep.
really it was really inspiring to hear this come from someone so young. I was like, wow, this is incredible. I'd love to see this kind of stuff.
Yeah. Our kids are going to be so much more cracked than we are, like
Oh
in
yeah.
the best possible way. Like I've already been thinking about like uh what yeah, first of all, that's super cool what she's building. I used to have a 3D printer. I ended up selling it because I wasn't using it actually. I
Hmm.
have a big laser engraving machine now because
Oh nice.
I mo- I I like to buy like toys, for myself, and I had like this great idea to like open up a laser engraving company during the pandemic. Anyway, so I did that for like a year on the side, and yeah, mine's like a big unit, like the orange one at the right there. Yeah, mine looks like that. So
Oh wow.
I have this big thing just sitting in my office, and I literally haven't touched it in like over a year. And my wife is getting on my case. She's like, "Are you gonna sell that thing?" Like, and so maybe I'll sign up for Maker Mesh and actually do something with it because I do like engraving things. It's super cool. It uses like a CO2 laser, so you can engrave metal, you can engrave
Ooh.
glass, you can engrave and cut wood and acrylic. Um, and yeah, so it's a super cool tool to have. It's just being grossly underutilized right now. But anyways, oh man, I forgot what I was gonna
Talking
say. Oh
about
yeah,
your kids, yeah.
our kids are going to be so like you already think about the generational gap between like Zoomers and millennials and like boomers, like we grew up with the family computer and
Mm-hmm.
like we knew from a very young age like how to Google stuff, how to find stuff on the internet, and that gave us like a big advantage. And our kids are going to be growing up with LLM agents that they can uh, ask any question to, and it will explain to them and give them sources and give them other ideas that they can go off and research or ask more questions about. So it's truly amazing. It's like it's going to be like Googling on steroids, and our kids will be able to learn so much so quickly from it. And I was thinking about that. Like, okay, my daughter is 4 months old. By the time she's like 4 or 5, like obviously I'm a math guy, so I'm gonna have her like doing a lot of math.
Mm-hmm.
But I was thinking like, okay, I want her to be a cracked programmer, so how am I gonna facilitate that? And so I've been kind of joking on X. I was like, before she's allowed to have her first OS, like I'm gonna make her compile the Linux kernel like on a Raspberry Pi. But obviously that's crazy, like. But what I do want to do is I don't want to give her like unfettered internet access as a child because
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of bad stuff out there. So what I would like to have set up by the time she's old enough to be able to like use a computer and start learning how to work on electronics and that kind of stuff is I want to have like a collection on my private network of like books and all kinds of materials and train a local LLM on it and give her access to that, right? So like give her her first Raspberry Pi and only allow her, local network access, but get and this like LLM tutor basically that's trained on all this material that I've collected so that she can like start learning how to program, start asking questions about the things that she's interested in, um, and be able to do that, without accessing the internet. So that's kind of my plan is I'm going to give her a computer from a very young age, but it's not going to have any games on it. Like if she wants to play a game, she's going to have to learn how to make it, And
Mm-hmm.
so my hope is that I can get her interested enough in computers by like showing her how to make like her first program and uh, and and showing her how to do all these cool things on a computer that she'll kind of take it and run with it and start being curious and learning and give her access to all this information and an LLM agent so that when she's playing on her computer she can like she can just query whatever it is she wants to learn about and learn about it. So obviously like people have told me like you can't you're you can't force your kids into like a certain thing. They'll have their own interests and whatever, but I'm hoping by exposing her to a bunch of cool technology and stuff when she's young in a safe in a safe way without unfettered internet access, that it'll spark her curiosity, kind of like how I grew up without electricity. So everything electronic that I came into contact with, I was taking it apart to like look at the circuits inside and
Mm-hmm.
figure out how electricity works. So I'm hoping I can kind of do the same thing with her, where I can give her a Raspberry Pi and like show her how to make like a really simple game, and then kind of let her imagination run wild, and so that she'll have that kind of natural curiosity to start exploring on her own. And then maybe when she's a little older, we can even I can even set up like a Minecraft server. We can play Minecraft, something a little less educational,
Yeah.
that
Interesting.
we can have fun with. I don't
That's
know.
a
That's
yeah.
just kind of my thoughts on it.
Yeah, that's a unique way of going about it. And I share your sentiment there also in regards to setting up a local network. For my eventual family that I like to start in the near future, I want to have like a home server like yourself there, and completely just like have ultimate control over like the kind of media my kids would be exposed to, because as you said, like there's man, I grew up with basically unfettered access to the internet, and I'm personally more than aware of just how not damaging, but it's just you. There's certain milestones that the internet opens you up to that really should be experienced at a later age, and if you're met with a lot of these, for lack of a better word, info hazards at too young of an age, it could really do. Some damage going forward, if I could put it that
Mm.
way. Um, but yeah, I'd like to have like a home server with, like a lot of the books like that I grew up with, or just very like traditional, like old cartoons, like the entire collection of like the like Looney Tunes. I remember watching that when I was growing up, or like old Soviet cartoons and all this media and whatnot. And having a local LLM that's able to parse through all that as well, and just kind of give the child some way to interact with it in that way to kind of tutor themselves would also be extremely useful. I've thought about like setting up an LLM somehow for a live stream. I don't know. I haven't the foggiest idea of how to go about it, but I know that it's certainly possible, and it gives me hope. So maybe I don't know. I don't know if my setup is going to be nearly as cracked as yours. I don't know if I'd go that far, but it's certainly great that we're even able to even discuss that kind of a possibility, because like in the previous generation, our parents are just all right. Well, here's the TV, or here's the computer. Don't fucking don't look at porn, or don't look at violence
Yeah.
and murder and all that, and they just kind of set you off your way and hope for the best.
Yeah, and then you take the remote. That's the first thing you're looking for.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't want her to have access to the internet until she's had time to like learn good values and stuff, and not be and not be exposed to all that stuff before she's had a chance to like learn about the world in a safe way. Um, so and the other thing is too, um, like as curious as I was as a kid, and I did a lot of learning too, but I also wasted a lot of time uh
Hmm.
playing there's this one game I played, it's called RuneScape, and now it's called
Oh yeah.
old school old school RuneScape. So
Oh
like
boy.
I've wasted like probably, I don't know, 8,000 hours of my life or something ridiculous on on that game. Yeah. so like I want her to not like waste a year of her life on video games. Like obviously I think games are important. uh you know um like they can teach you things, and they can um certain games can also um I guess um be beneficial in a way, but I don't want her to waste a bunch of time getting scammed at the GE, for
Yeah.
examples, by strangers on the internet. So,
uh,
yeah, no, I think our kids will be 10 times smarter than us, and that's another thing to be have some hope about for for the future, is that even though less people are having kids, I think the people that are having kids, their kids are going to be way smarter than even we are, because they're just going to have access to better tools, more information, more streamlined ways to acquire that information. Like if I had Chat GPT when I was trying to learn about electronics as a kid, I could have I could have learned so much more, so much faster,
mhm.
instead of just reading like Wikipedia articles, or like googling around, because most of that stuff I couldn't understand anyways. Like I remember searching for basic circuit diagrams on Google over dial-up internet while the generator was running. Uh, and that wasn't exactly fruitful, but uh, you know, yeah. So I think they're going to end up a lot smarter than we are.
Oh, absolutely. I sure would hope so, because that would not be great if they were the same kind of the same levels of smartness as we are. Because the problems that we have coming up in the future, we're definitely going to need some really capable people to help us out with it. But no, I'm right there with you, man. I sunk a decent chunk of my life into video games growing up, just on by nature of you know living online, and it could really be a time sink. But as Jordan Peterson has said, is that like the issue with video games is that it's not that they're bad for you, it's that they're they're so good at allowing you an escape from your world, and especially if your world is shit, like if you're getting bullied at school, or you're just having issues at home where you can't get along with your parents, if you just like feel like an outcast, well, the internet is a safe haven, and for a lot of those people, and it offers them an escape, unlike anything else. Like you really can't compare the dopamine high to getting a kill streak in Call of Duty to any amount of homework or anything you'll ever do in school. So I mean, it's almost impossible to compete with that kind of attention economy. Um, so I share your sentiment in that regard, because it's far too addicting. But I am like you. I am very hopeful for the future, because man, the amount of stuff that they're going to be able to do. I mean, even right now, you have 3D printers in libraries. You can get just about any book that you want for free on Library Genesis. And as you were saying, like growing up when you had to do all that manual research, man, the amount of times I spent on like forums or like just reading like Yahoo Answers, or just like all this weird information that's scattered across all these different platforms. If I was able to have them in one single place, it would have made it a lot easier to
Mhm.
get this info. Like growing up, I remember I used to tinker with computers a lot, and installing basically like homebrew software on like PSPs or like phones and whatnot. Like I really became interested in um, doing a lot of that stuff, like jailbreaking and whatnot. And yeah, getting information that was like trustworthy, hoping that you wouldn't brick your your piece of tech that you were working on, because the patch that they developed in the last month that actually came out on time, or whether it like meets certain parameters. It's just all this like little fixing that you had to kind of do on the fly. It would have been a lot easier if I had an LLM that was able to, tell me exactly, like step by step, how do I go about getting this, or even just like doing research for school projects. I remember it being like the worst thing ever, because you'd load up a Wikipedia page and it's just text on text on text. And you're like, man,
Mhm.
there's like a fifth of this, not even a tenth of this, that is actually viable and useful for me, and I need to find it now. But you have to go through it for hours and hours and hours. Oh man, just doing research alone on school projects would be so much easier if I had an LLM do it for me.
Mhm. Yeah, it can be a really good like learning partner. That's kind of how I use tools like ChatGPT and Claude. There's a lot of people who are using it to try to um like like one shot an app, or like just like pump out code without really understanding uh what it's doing. But I I actually get a lot more utility from it by trying to understand the problem I'm working on, and then kind of like querying the LLM with specific questions, right?
Mm-hmm.
Questions that either like clear up something for me, or kind of help me push the boundary of my understanding a little bit. And that's how it's been most useful as a tool for me. Now, obviously, you kind of have to develop an intuition for when it's like making up things or hallucinating.
Mm-hmm.
But if you've like grown up on the internet, like you kind of already have like that intuition of when something is like um, false, or you know what I mean. I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
it's kind
yeah.
of the same skill. It's kind of the same skill as like knowing when you get like a scam email.
Mm-hmm.
uh like something just feels like off about this email, and you develop that same kind of intuition when you're using an LLM of like, okay, uh that seems like it could be right, but like I'm not gonna like trust that. And then you like ask a few more questions to try to like get to the bottom of it, or you like test it out and be like, actually, what you said isn't true, right? And so like having that kind of conversational, um like Socratic method kind of dialogue with the LLM, I think is the most helpful thing. If you're just using it to try to pump out code and not really taking the time to understand the code it's giving you, or what that code is trying to do, like you're not going to be very successful with it. You might get your app to work or do a thing, but you're not going to really gain anything from that, and you're certainly not going to level up your skills by doing it that way.
No, absolutely, and that Socratic method that you mentioned, I also find that is one of the more optimal ways to use an LLM, because like at least for me with my learning style, to dig down deep on a concept, I have to ask like the dumbest questions that just come to mind, like just the most basic stuff. I mean, stuff that you would feel embarrassed about asking in a classroom full of people. Um, but that's just my method. That's how I learn best, by just like asking as many questions as possible. Like, why is it that way? Well, what about this? What about that? Um, and an LLM is a perfect tool for exercising that kind of thinking, to dig down like deeper into a concept. I mean, I for just about all my research or writing that I do for the Whitepill project, I like Perplexity is my number one tool. I use that as my main search engine over Google, and have been for a very long time. It is by far like the most useful thing that I've ever spent $20 on, because there's just no end. Like the only limit is your imagination. That's about it. I mean, the fact that you can tell an LLM to take on a personality or to take on a certain perspective, like say, oh, need to figure out something about the tax code, and I have to, I have to use this LLM. Well, I can certainly tell it to, okay, well, you are now my tax agent, and I need to find out the most efficient way to go about this process to save myself like as much money as possible. It, like when you just lay out all those like just very basic fundamental instructions, the world is your oyster at that point. If you're able to just kind of break something down to its core concepts like that, I mean that is so much more effective than simply just going to Google or relying on your government website to have that information, or what other resource. Like it's the amount of leverage that it has given me in my everyday life. I couldn't imagine living without it at this point. The amount of times that I use it.
I agree, 100%.
Certainly. And
Okay.
yeah, for timing, I was actually going to ask because we're at the 2-hour mark.
Yeah, my wife and daughter have woken up from their nap, and I have to cook some supper, so I think we gotta wrap it up here. But I've really enjoyed chatting with you, and if you would like to have me back on for another episode at some point, I would definitely do that.
Yeah, certainly, man. It's been a pleasure speaking with you as well. Once again, welcome to Canada. Congratulations on your child. Wishing you the best of luck in your pursuits there with the startup there. I'm hopeful to see, hopefully eventually, like the tool and stuff that you guys are working on is actually gonna change a lot of things about the way the healthcare system is run. Hopefully you'll be able to help us fix it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I don't want to say too much right now because I don't want to dox myself at this point, but I can say it is already making a big impact, and my hope is that it will that impact will grow in the future. So I'm sure you'll hear about it at some point.
Outstanding. Well, yeah, thanks again for coming on, and we will see you guys later.
Awesome. Thank you. Bye.